Imagine this: a peaceful morning, a steaming cup of coffee in your hand, soft sunlight pouring through the window. Life feels perfect. But then boom, a shadow flickers across the glass, then another and another. For figures in matching blue uniforms line up outside your door. And leading them? None other than Karen Thompson, the iron-fisted queen of the HOA. With a piercing gaze and a homemade warrant in hand, she declares, "Mr. Ethan Carter, you are under investigation by the HOA for serious violations. An unapproved garage color, improper parking, and worst of all, failure to attend the HOA meeting. Damn it, it's come to this. The HOA isn't just some neighborhood committee, it's practically a mafia. But instead of running criminal rackets, they run the trash schedule, parking rules, and even the color of your house. And if you think the HOA is just a harmless little group, think again. Because Ethan Carter is about to face the most brutal HOA showdown in history, where the rules are written by a woman who will stop at nothing to maintain her absolute power. The dark truth about the HOA is about to be exposed. The shady tactics, the cutthroat politics, and the explosive confrontations, it's all about to go down. Who will win? The HOA or Ethan Carter? Find out now on Real HOA Drama. And don't forget to subscribe right now so you don't miss a single plot twist in the craziest HOA battle of all time. Ethan Carter was enjoying a peaceful morning, sipping his hot coffee, basking in the soft sunlight streaming through the kitchen window. Everything seemed perfect until he caught a glimpse of a shadow in the reflection of the glass. Not just one, but four. He set his cup down, frowning. Oh, for the love of God. Not the HOA again. Stepping onto his front porch, he was greeted by a squad of people in matching blue polo shirts, lined up as if they were about to serve a federal arrest warrant. Their plastic name badges looked like something a kid would buy from the discount bin at a toy store. And leading them? None other than Karen Thompson, the HOA's self-appointed dictator, arms crossed, an expression of triumph on her face, like she'd just found the perfect excuse to throw someone in jail. Beside her stood Bob, her ever-loyal lapdog, practically wagging his tail in anticipation of orders. Then there was Linda, the neighborhood gossip queen, scribbling something furiously into a little notebook. And finally, Mark, a big guy with the expression of someone trying really hard to understand what was happening. Karen took a step forward and dramatically held up a brightly colored document like it was a sacred decree. Her voice carried the authority of a Supreme Court judge. "Mr. Ethan Carter, you are under investigation by the HOA for multiple violations of community regulations. We are here to enforce the rules." Ethan blinked. "What rules?" "Your garage has been painted an unauthorized color." He glanced at his garage, same silver gray it had been since he moved in 5 years ago. "You have parked an unapproved vehicle on your property." His eyes shifted to his perfectly legal, fully registered Chevy Silverado. Karen took a deep breath, preparing to deliver the knockout punch. "And most importantly," she announced, voice dripping with self-importance, "you have engaged in conduct unbecoming of a community member." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Unbecoming means?" Bob, with the seriousness of someone announcing constitutional law, clarified. "You have refused to attend HOA meetings. This is considered an act of defiance against the authority of the HOA." Ethan nearly laughed out loud. "So, what exactly do you plan to do?" he asked, crossing his arms, deliberately injecting a bit of challenge into the air. Karen motioned with her hand. Mark, the large but apparently slow-to-process enforcer, stepped forward and pulled something from his pocket. Ethan stared. Plastic zip ties. Mark attempted a menacing glare, but the tension on his face made him look more like a kid playing cops and robbers than an actual law enforcer. "We will be detaining you until this matter is resolved," Karen declared. Ethan cleared his throat, pretending to ponder the situation. "Do I have the right to call an attorney?" Linda, looking very serious, nodded as she jotted something down. "Likely. Suspect requests lawyer." Ethan let out a slow exhale, shaking his head. "Do any of you actually understand that you have no legal authority to arrest anyone?" Mark and Bob exchanged confused glances. Karen, however, held her ground. We have the full authority of the HOA, and the HOA has absolute control over this community. Ethan sighed. Well then, I suppose it's time I defend myself. Slowly, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and flipped it open, revealing a real badge. The badge of a town marshal. The official, legal, actual law enforcement officer of this town. Karen froze. Linda's notebook hit the ground. Bob's jaw dropped. Mark, well, he probably still wasn't sure what was going on. Ethan smiled. Well, he said, his voice calm but firm, I'm glad to see you all take law enforcement so seriously. Because right now, you are all guilty of impersonating officers and attempted unlawful detainment. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. A single bead of sweat rolled down Bob's forehead. Karen's grip on her fake warrant tightened as she scrambled to come up with a defense. Why you can't threaten the HOA like this, she stammered. Ethan smirked. Oh, I'm not threatening. I'm simply informing you of the consequences if you don't get the hell off my property right now. That was the final straw. The HOA patrol scattered like cockroaches under a flashlight. Karen nearly tripped over the porch steps in her haste, rage burning in her eyes. Linda muttered something about filing a full report. Bob sprinted like a hamster on steroids. And Mark, well, Mark still looked confused. Ethan folded his arms and watched them retreat, shaking his head. He'd seen plenty of stupid criminals in his time as an officer. But this was, without a doubt, one of the dumbest stunts he'd ever witnessed. He took another sip of his coffee, lukewarm now. Something told him this wasn't over. The next morning, Ethan stepped outside with his coffee in hand, enjoying the crisp morning air and the fleeting moment of peace before the day truly began. Something was off. His trash can was missing. He frowned. It was always in the same spot, right by the garage. But today it was gone. He walked over, checked both sides of the house. Nothing. Glanced at his neighbors. They still had theirs. Just him. And then, from across the street, a deliberate cough.
Karen.
She stood on her porch, arms crossed, a smug expression plastered across her face like she had just completed a high-stakes covert mission. Ethan sighed, set his coffee down on the porch step, and folded his arms, locking eyes with her. Morning, Karen. I don't know how many trash cans one person needs, but stealing someone else's is a bit excessive. Karen raised an eyebrow, feigning over-the-top innocence. Oh, Mr. Carter, I have no idea what you're talking about. If your trash can is missing, perhaps you should review the HOA regulations. Ethan tilted his head, studying her like he was waiting for her to crack and admit it was just a stupid prank. She didn't. She was dead serious. Out of the corner of his eye, he spotted Linda peeking through her curtains, clearly taking notes for her HOA report. Meanwhile, Bob had slinked onto Karen's porch, trying his best to look intimidating but resembling more of a guilty puppy waiting to be scolded. I think you'll be receiving a formal response in the mail, Karen added, her voice sugar-sweet but sharp as a blade. Right on cue, a thud echoed from his mailbox. A large envelope. Karen smirked, gave him a knowing wink, then turned on her heel and disappeared into her house, as if she had just delivered the finishing move in some grand HOA showdown. Ethan let out a slow breath and walked over to retrieve the envelope. Thick, heavy, and from the sheer passionate aggression behind the typed letters, it was clear that whoever wrote it had way too much free time. He ripped it open and started reading. Notice of severe violations. Section 1. Termination of trash collection services. Due to noncompliance with HOA standards, you are no longer eligible for community waste collection until corrective actions are taken. Section 2. Prohibited garage parking. Your garage, having violated the HOA's approved color scheme, is now considered non-compliant and therefore cannot be used for vehicle storage. Any car parked inside will be subject to penalties. Section 3. Mandatory HOA disciplinary meeting. You are required to attend an HOA disciplinary review this Friday, during which the board will evaluate your actions and determine any necessary punitive measures. Ethan inhaled deeply. He wasn't sure what annoyed him more, The fact that the HOA actually believed they had authority over him, or the fact that someone had taken the time to type this out like it was a damn Supreme Court ruling. Looking up, he spotted the HOA's security camera mounted on a street pole. No doubt, Karen was watching him right now, waiting for his reaction. Ethan smirked. Then slowly, deliberately, he tore the letter in half. Then in quarters. Then in eighths. Finally, he dropped the shredded pieces onto the pavement, right in front of the camera, as if that was all the response they needed. Right on cue, Karen's front door slammed open. "Ethan Carter," her voice screeched, filled with pure HOA outrage. "You can't ignore the HOA." Ethan shrugged.
Huh.
"Looks like I just did." Bob and Linda had both materialized on her porch, looking like they couldn't decide whether to run away or stick around and watch Karen implode. Ethan chuckled, picked up his coffee, and walked back inside, leaving Karen fuming in the middle of the street, her face turning an impressive shade of red. He knew this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to let things go. But then again, neither was he. This war had only just begun. That morning, Ethan stepped outside, ready to start his day with a hot cup of coffee and a relaxed mindset. Or at least, he tried to be relaxed. But the moment his eyes landed on his garage, the headache hit. Right in front of his driveway stood a massive plastic sign, firmly staked into the ground. Bold, red letters screamed at him like a nuclear warning. "Garage use prohibited, by order of the HOA." Ethan blinked, then just stared at it. Oh, for hell's sake. She's actually serious about this? He glanced across the street and, of course, Bob and Mark were standing there, pretending to be busy with their notepads. Bob, as usual, was trying too hard to look official, which only made him look like a clueless car dealership intern rather than an actual HOA inspector. Mark, on the other hand, was gripping a pen but wasn't writing anything, just absent-mindedly doodling circles like a kid pretending to take notes. Ethan took a slow sip of his coffee, sighed, and looked at them like they were a bunch of mischievous toddlers rather than full-grown adults. Without a word, he stepped forward, bent down, and yanked the sign out of the ground like it was nothing more than a cheap lawn decoration. Then, with the same nonchalance, he tossed it onto the curb. Didn't even check for their reaction. Just turned on his heel and walked back inside. Behind him, Bob and Mark stood frozen, looking as if they'd just witnessed a grand theft auto but had no idea what to do about it. And then, the inevitable happened. "Ethan Carter." Karen's voice pierced through the morning air like an angry hawk screeching over its nest. Ethan inhaled deeply, turned around, and yep, there she was. Karen was storming across the street, her HOA-issued polo practically rippling from the sheer force of her movement. Arms flailing like she was directing traffic, her face was a perfect blend of rage, shock, and pure horror at the fact that someone had dared ignore her authority. "You just destroyed HOA property," Karen shrieked, her voice so high-pitched that birds probably evacuated the trees. Ethan tilted his head. "Destroyed?" He pointed at the sign, now resting peacefully on the curb. "Looks fine to me." Bob cleared his throat like he wanted to calm the situation down, but Karen was already too far gone. "You can't just remove an official HOA warning," she continued, her face now an impressive shade of red, completely ignoring the fact that the sign was on his own damn property. Ethan shrugged. "I think you're confusing the HOA with actual law enforcement, Karen." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but before she could unleash another dramatic monologue, Ethan simply turned around and shut the door in her face. For a few seconds, silence. Then, from outside, a furious scream. "This isn't over." Ethan shook his head, smirked, and set his coffee down on the table. That's when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Ethan squinted. Who the hell was texting him this early? He opened the message. One single line. "I have proof of illegal HOA activities. Meet me at Jackson's Cafe. 4 p.m. No name. Just a signature." Ethan raised an eyebrow. Now, this was interesting. It looked like this war was about to reach a whole new level. That afternoon, Ethan was finally enjoying a rare moment of peace, feet kicked up on the coffee table, an ice-cold beer in hand, and a baseball game playing on TV. This morning, he'd already dealt with the HOA sign fiasco, and he had hoped that Karen would finally drop it. Then the doorbell rang. Ethan took a deep breath. No way. He got up, checked the doorbell camera, and instantly realized things had escalated in the worst possible way. 2 police cars were parked outside his house. 2 officers stood at his doorstep, hands resting on their belts, the tense expressions of men who had just been called to an emergency situation. And across the street?
Karen.
Standing on her lawn, clutching her chest like a traumatized soap opera star, pretending to tremble as if she had just escaped a kidnapping. Ethan sighed, hit the unlock button, and stepped outside. One of the officers stepped forward, voice cautious. "Mr. Ethan Carter?" Ethan folded his arms. "That's me." The officer glanced at a paper in his hand, then back up with a slight frown. "We received an emergency call reporting an armed and dangerous individual at this address." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "That's so? Who made the call?" Right on cue, Karen dramatically stepped forward. She put on the performance of a lifetime, her eyes wide, her expression filled with feigned distress. "Oh, Chief. I'm so sorry I had to do this, but I truly had no other choice." She inhaled sharply, as if preparing to deliver a devastating revelation. I saw him in his yard earlier, with a gun. He looked so threatening. I was only worried for the safety of the community." Ethan closed his eyes, counting down from 10 in his head just to keep from laughing. The officer next to him, Officer Reed, gave Karen a long, skeptical look before turning back to Ethan. "Do you have any weapons on you?" Ethan opened his jacket, showing them he wasn't carrying. Then he looked straight at Karen. "Seems like she enjoys using the police as her personal tool." Silence. Then, Officer Daniels, the second officer, sighed and rubbed his temples, clearly out of patience. "Mr. Carter, this is obviously a false report." Karen's eyes went wide. "False? No. I was just..." Officer Reed turned to her, his tone sharper now. "Mrs. Thompson, calling 911 and fabricating a public safety threat can lead to serious charges, including filing a false police report and wasting emergency resources." Karen blinked rapidly, as if struggling to process the situation. Ethan, meanwhile, just crossed his arms and enjoyed the show. "I was just trying to protect my neighbors," Karen cried, desperate to regain control of the narrative. Officer Daniels shook his head and gestured toward the security cameras mounted on Ethan's house. "You do realize Mr. Carter has security cameras, right? If we check the footage and don't find anything that supports your claim, we'll have to file a report on this incident." Karen's face drained of color. She knew. She had gone too far. Ethan smirked. "Oh, I'd be more than happy to send you this morning's footage. Want me to email it over now?" Officer Reed exchanged a look with his partner before turning back to Karen. "We're going to let you off with a warning this time, but if this happens again, you'll be facing legal consequences." Karen's fists clenched, her lips pressed into a tight line, clearly struggling not to explode. She had lost. Again. The officers returned to their patrol cars, ready to leave. But before shutting the door, Officer Daniels glanced at Ethan with a knowing smile. "I'm guessing this won't be the last time we get a call about her." Ethan chuckled. "You don't need to be a detective to figure that out." The squad cars rolled away. Ethan turned back toward Karen. She stood there, jaw clenched, hands balled into fists so tight her knuckles turned white. But for once, she said nothing. No screaming, no threats. Just that look, the look of someone already scheming their next move. Ethan didn't need years of law enforcement experience to know this wasn't over. In fact, it was about to get a whole lot worse. Ethan woke up the next morning to a strange feeling. Peace. No HOA letters stuffed under his door. No new warning signs posted in front of his garage. No Bob or Mark loitering across the street with their fake inspector notebooks. Too quiet. And Ethan knew that was never a good sign. He walked into the kitchen, poured himself a fresh cup of coffee, and had just sat down when... Bam, bam, bam. The unmistakable roar of heavy machinery outside his window. Frowning, Ethan got up and stepped onto the porch. A massive construction truck had just parked in front of his house. Ethan narrowed his eyes as a group of workers in hard hats and reflective vests started unloading shovels, drills, and cables from the back. One man, who looked like the crew leader, was holding a clipboard and directing the team toward Ethan's front yard. Ethan took a long, slow breath. Of course. He stepped down the porch and intercepted the man before he could set foot on his lawn. "Can I help you?" Ethan asked, his voice calm but firm. The man, wearing a company shirt with a Municipal Plumbing Services logo, barely looked up from his clipboard. "We got a work order this morning from the HOA. Emergency pipe repair under this property." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Emergency pipe repair?" He crossed his arms. "Who signed off on that?" The man flipped through his paperwork, scanning the signature. "Karen Thompson, HOA president." Of course. Ethan clenched his jaw. His plumbing was fine. This was just another petty stunt from Karen. Without a word, he pulled out his wallet, flipped it open, and flashed his town marshal badge. "This order isn't valid." He locked eyes with the crew leader. "This is private property. The HOA has no legal authority here without my consent. I'm asking you to stop this work immediately." The man's eyes widened as he took a second look at the badge. He swallowed hard, then glanced back at his workers. Guys? Shut it down. Shut it down now." A scramble followed as workers dropped their shovels, shut off their drills, and exchanged nervous glances. And then, the storm arrived. Karen stormed out of her house, arms flailing, face as red as a fire engine. "What do you think you're doing?" she shrieked at the workers. "Keep going. This work has been ordered by the HOA. You have to follow our directives." The crew leader looked between Karen and Ethan, then back to Karen, then back to Ethan. "Ma'am, he's the town marshal. And he just said." "I don't care who he is," Karen screeched. "The HOA has full control over this community. You take orders from me." Ethan let out a low chuckle, shaking his head as he looked at her. "That's not how the law works, Karen." Her nostrils flared. "You just wait. Ethan Carter. You think you can ignore the HOA forever?" Ethan exhaled slowly, then, without breaking eye contact, pulled out his phone and dialed. Karen froze. He held the phone to his ear, waiting a second before speaking. "This is Marshal Carter. I'm reporting an unauthorized trespassing incident by the Green Hills HOA. The person responsible is Karen Thompson. I'm requesting a formal investigation into the authority they're claiming over private properties." Karen visibly stiffened, like she had just taken a punch to the gut. The crew leader took 2 giant steps back and turned to his workers. "Pack it up, guys. We're out of here." Karen's mouth fell open. She tried to form words, some kind of excuse, some kind of defense, but nothing came out. Ethan simply folded his arms and gave her a long, unimpressed stare. "You've zip-tied me. You've stolen my trash can. You've put up fake HOA warning signs. You've filed a false police report. And now, you've fabricated a non-existent plumbing emergency to tear up my yard." He tilted his head. "And you think you're not in trouble?" Karen's fists clenched at her sides. Her face was still bright red, but this time, she didn't say a word. Ethan smirked, turned around, and walked back inside. Karen stood there, watching the workers pack up, watching the construction truck drive away, watching every single part of her scheme crumble in front of her eyes. And she knew one thing for certain. Ethan Carter wasn't someone she could mess with. Ethan walked into the community center with a coffee in hand and a knowing smirk on his face. This was going to be an interesting night. The room was packed. Some residents looked curious, others irritated, and a few were clearly just here for the free entertainment. At the front of the room, behind a long table draped in white, Karen Thompson sat like a queen at her throne, flanked by her 3 loyal minions, Bob, Linda, and Mark. Bob looked nervous. Linda clutched her notebook like it was a sacred text. And Mark, well, he was just there. Karen cleared her throat, standing up with an intensity that could only mean one thing. She was about to declare war. "We cannot allow a troublemaker to live in our community." A few people nodded, but most just glanced around, confused about what the hell was going on. Karen pressed forward, her voice dripping with manufactured outrage. Ethan Carter has repeatedly violated HOA rules, openly defied our authority, and, most importantly, caused nothing but chaos. The HOA cannot tolerate this kind of resident. Silence. Then, Ethan stood up. Calmly, he set his coffee down, pulled out his wallet, and held up his town marshal badge for the entire room to see. And the HOA has no authority to evict anyone. The air in the room shifted, like someone had just stubbed out a mafia boss's cigar mid-meeting. Karen froze for half a second, then quickly recovered. We have every right to manage this community. The HOA bylaws don't override actual laws. Ethan cut her off, his voice calm but commanding. I own my home. I pay taxes. I never signed any contract that gives the HOA the power to remove me. So, Karen, I suggest you sit down, because I have a story to tell. Karen's jaw tightened, but she sat. Fists clenched. Ethan pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, then turned it toward the crowd. I have a friend named James. He's very good with technology. And James found some very interesting files about our HOA. The room fell dead silent. Some people leaned forward. Karen began to sweat. Ethan swiped the screen. 1. HOA funds, $30,000 unaccounted for. Here's a financial statement from the HOA's account. Notice anything strange? Over $30,000 has mysteriously disappeared this past year, with no official record of where it went. A few gasps. Linda blinked rapidly, glancing at Karen. Bob looked like someone just told him Santa Claus wasn't real. 2. Raising HOA fees for private parties. Ethan swiped again. A chain of emails appeared on the screen. Here's proof that Karen personally ordered HOA fees to be increased. But instead of using those funds for neighborhood maintenance, she spent them on community events, or more specifically, private parties for herself and her little clique. A man near the door slammed his hand on the table. Wait, you mean I've been paying extra HOA fees so she can throw herself parties? Karen took a shaky breath, lips trembling as she scrambled for a way out. 3. Rigging HOA elections to stay in power. Ethan swiped again. And finally, Karen has never held a legitimate HOA election. The bylaws require an annual vote for leadership, but since she took over, she secretly changed the rules to keep herself in charge, indefinitely. Boom. The room erupted. She's a fraud, someone shouted. How long has this been going on? A woman snapped, glaring at Bob. Karen jumped to her feet, slamming her hands on the table. This is slander. All of it. Ethan raised an eyebrow. So, you're saying these bank statements are fake? These emails aren't yours. He paused. Because if that's the case, I'd be more than happy to send all of this to the city for an official investigation. Karen's face drained of color. Ethan took a step forward, voice smooth but razor-sharp. You spent weeks trying to get rid of me, Karen. But it looks like you're the one who doesn't belong here. Karen glanced around, desperate for support. But there was none. Bob looked at his shoes. Linda quietly pushed her chair back. And Mark. Well, Mark still looked like he had no idea what was happening. Our election, someone shouted. Yeah, we need a new HOA president. Karen's eyes darted around the room, panicked. But she knew. This time, she had truly lost. Ethan took a sip of his coffee. And smirked. Well, I have to say, this is the most entertaining HOA meeting I've ever been to. As Ethan stepped out of the cafe, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. A firm voice spoke on the other end. Mr. Carter, this is Tom Withers, town building inspector. We received a complaint from the HOA regarding serious code violations at your property. Our inspection team will be arriving in 20 minutes. Ethan stopped in his tracks. His grip on the phone tightened. Karen. She was making her final move, hoping that this time, he wouldn't be able to dodge the hit. Too bad for her. Ethan Carter didn't go down that easily. By the time Ethan pulled into his driveway, 3 white inspection trucks were already parked along the curb. A group of uniformed inspectors climbed out, carrying clipboards and tools. And, of course, Karen was standing across the street, arms folded, a smug grin stretching across her face like she was moments away from watching him get dragged out of his house in disgrace. Ethan stepped out of his car and walked straight up to Tom Withers, the lead inspector. Tom was a no-nonsense kind of guy, middle-aged, with the look of someone who had seen one too many HOA complaints in his lifetime. Ethan extended a hand. "Busy day, Tom?" Ethan asked, voice calm but dripping with irritation. Tom sighed. "You have no idea, Ethan. We received a complaint stating that your home has unpermitted structural modifications, illegal plumbing work, and evidence of a pest infestation." Ethan let out a short laugh. "So, what, you're telling me they think I'm running some kind of underground rat kingdom?" Tom shrugged. "I don't buy it, but regulations are regulations. We have to check it out. Won't take long." Ethan nodded, stepping aside. "Knock yourselves out." Meanwhile, from across the street, Karen watched like a queen waiting for her enemy's execution. For the next 2 hours, the inspectors scanned, checked, and tested every corner of Ethan's house. They examined the plumbing. Everything was up to code. No leaks. No illegal modifications. They checked the structural integrity, completely compliant. Not a single unauthorized adjustment. They searched for pests, aside from a lone spider crawling up the wall, nothing. And the whole time, Ethan sat on his couch, drinking coffee, casually waiting for the inevitable conclusion. Finally, Tom stepped out of the house, clipboard in hand, looking thoroughly unimpressed. "Mr. Carter, we've completed our inspection and—" Tom paused, glancing toward Karen before continuing. "We found absolutely no violations. Your home is fully compliant with all town regulations." From across the street, Karen's smug expression collapsed instantly. She stood frozen, her mouth slightly open, as if someone had just slapped her in the face. "That's impossible," she shrieked, storming forward. "You must have missed something. Maybe something's hidden under the floor. Maybe he bribed someone." Tom's eyes narrowed. He crossed his arms. "Are you implying that my team doesn't know how to do our job, Mrs. Thompson?" Karen clamped her mouth shut. But she knew. She had lost. Ethan stepped forward, a slow smirk creeping across his face. "So, we're done here, right?" he said, taking a sip of coffee. Tom nodded. "Completely." "But Ethan," he lowered his voice. "This isn't just a petty complaint anymore. This is harassment." Ethan patted Tom's shoulder. "Don't worry. I've got a plan." Tom gave a knowing nod before signaling his team to pack up. The inspection trucks pulled away, leaving Karen standing there, flushed, humiliated, speechless. Ethan pulled out his phone, scrolling through a set of documents. Karen glared at him, her face burning with anger and confusion. Ethan dialed a number. "Hello, law office? I'd like to file a lawsuit for systematic harassment and false reporting." The defendant? The Green Hills HOA, led by Karen Thompson. Karen froze. Ethan met her gaze, his voice low and sharp as a knife. "You played your final card, Karen. Now it's my turn." Karen Thompson had never felt pressure like this before. 3 days after Ethan filed his lawsuit, the town government launched an official investigation into the Green Hills HOA. Word spread faster than wildfire. Residents who had once blindly supported Karen suddenly found themselves questioning who they had really put their trust in. Ethan stood on his porch, coffee in hand, watching as financial auditors, police officers, and a team of government attorneys rolled into the neighborhood. If this were a movie, this was the final boss battle, and Karen had just realized her endgame had arrived. After 2 days of combing through records, a formal hearing was held at the community center. But this time, Karen wasn't standing at the podium like a queen. She was sitting hunched in the corner, pale and shaken. Tom Withers, the lead financial investigator, stepped up to the podium, flipping open a thick folder. His voice was calm, but razor-sharp. "We have reviewed the HOA's financial records over the last 3 years, and we have identified over $30,000 withdrawn from the community fund with no legitimate invoices to justify the expenses." The room erupted. Murmurs. Gasps. Karen's knuckles went white. Tom continued, flipping to another page. "These funds," he went on, were used for purposes unrelated to community welfare, including questionable expenses such as private event catering, premium wine purchases, and he paused, scanning the list. A vacation to Florida. A man shot out of his chair. I knew it. I remember seeing her post beach photos, but she called it an HOA conference. Karen's face drained of color. Tom cleared his throat and moved on. Fraudulent elections. We also discovered, he said, turning the page, that no legitimate elections have been held during Mrs. Thompson's entire tenure as HOA president. A collective gasp. Someone blurted, "How is that even possible?" Tom nodded. HOA bylaws require leadership to be voted on annually. Yet, somehow, Mrs. Thompson has conveniently forgotten to hold an election for the past 6 years. Karen's mouth opened and closed, searching for an excuse. I was just keeping things stable. I did what was best for this community. If not me, then who?
Bob?
Linda? Mark? All three of them, suddenly dragged into the mess, looked like they wanted to sink into the floor. An elderly man, Mr. Gregory, one of the longest-standing residents, stood up, his voice hoarse but filled with anger. You stole our HOA funds to go on vacation. You raised our fees to throw private parties. You ran this neighborhood like we were your peasants. And now you have the audacity to sit there and claim you're the only one who can run it. A thunderous round of applause. Karen looked around, panicked. For the first time, she had no control over the room. A government attorney stepped forward. His voice was steady, authoritative. Based on these findings, the current HOA leadership is hereby removed from office effective immediately. A new election will be held, and a third-party oversight committee will ensure a fair process. The room erupted again. People jumped to their feet, cheering. Karen shot up from her seat, voice shrill with desperation. You can't do this. This is my HOA. I built this. You can't. A deep, steady voice cut through the noise. Sit down, Karen. The room went dead silent. All eyes turned to Ethan. He stood there, arms crossed, gaze locked onto her, completely unfazed. Karen's eyes darted around, desperate for allies. But she had none. Bob stared at the floor. Linda was quietly deleting HOA documents off her phone. Mark still looked completely lost. Karen realized it. She had lost. Her hands clenched into fists, her face twisted in anger. But for the first time in her life, she had nothing left to say. She yanked up her purse, stormed out of the room, and slammed the door behind her. And just like that, the 6-year reign of Karen Thompson was over. Ethan took a slow sip of coffee. Then he smiled. Well, that was the most entertaining HOA meeting I've ever been to. The room burst into laughter. A man clapped him on the shoulder. Carter, you should run for HOA president. Ethan choked on his coffee. God, no. I'd rather take on an organized crime ring. The room roared with laughter. And just like that, the Green Hills HOA entered a new era. An era without Karen Thompson. Karen Thompson stormed out of the meeting room like her heels were on fire. The room behind her was buzzing with angry whispers, disgusted glances, and the realization that her reign of terror had officially ended. She had no power, no authority, most importantly, no allies. But Karen Thompson wasn't the kind of person to go down without a fight. She shoved open the emergency exit, bolting straight to the parking lot, breathing heavily. She needed to get out of here.
Now.
Her shaking hands fumbled through her purse, grabbing her car keys. She practically threw herself into the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel. And then, a siren blared. Red and blue lights flashed. Karen froze. A police cruiser had blocked the parking lot exit. The doors opened, and stepping out were Officer Reed and Officer Daniels, the same 2 officers she had tried to manipulate into arresting Ethan. Reed pulled out a warrant and read aloud, his voice firm. Karen Thompson, you are under arrest for embezzlement, financial fraud, and abuse of power. Step out of the vehicle immediately. Karen's eyes went wide.
No.
You can't do this to me, she shrieked, gripping the steering wheel like she could somehow will herself out of this reality. Daniel stepped forward, opened the door, and pulled her out. Karen flailed, desperate, screaming, "I'm the HOA president. I run this neighborhood. I have immunity." From the top of the community center steps, Ethan watched it all unfold, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "You're not the HOA president anymore, Karen. Now you're just a criminal." Reed snapped the handcuffs onto her wrists with a sharp click. The entire neighborhood stood silent. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, "Well done, Karen." And the entire street erupted. Applause, whistles, laughter. Karen's face twisted in fury as she was dragged past her former subjects, their expressions a mix of vindication and sheer amusement. "You'll regret this. The HOA will fall apart without me. You all need me," she screamed, voice hoarse. Ethan took a slow sip of coffee. "Yeah, we'll try to survive without you." The car door slammed shut. The engine revved. Karen was driven away, her 6-year reign of terror ending in flashing lights and handcuffs. For the first time in years, Green Hills HOA finally felt free. As the dust settled, Ethan noticed Bob and Mark standing nearby, looking like two abandoned puppies. Bob was sweating buckets, his face pale as a ghost. Mark, as always, still didn't seem to fully grasp what was happening. Bob stammered, his voice shaking. I had no idea she was stealing money." He turned to Officer Reed, looking like a kid begging not to get detention. "I was just following orders." Mark nodded frantically. "Yeah, we were just following orders." Reed raised an eyebrow. "So you're telling me you had no clue about any of this?" Bob swallowed hard. I just thought she was doing what was best for the HOA." Ethan stepped forward, eyeing them both. "Well, you two want to go down with her, or do you want to help the investigation?" Bob blanched. Mark blinked. Then Bob did the fastest mental calculation of his life and blurted out, "I'll talk. I'll tell you everything." Less than a week later, Karen was formally indicted on multiple charges. Bob and Mark, in a desperate bid for leniency, spilled everything: the fake invoices, the hidden accounts, the secret slush fund. Linda vanished, like she had never existed. And the Green Hills HOA? For the first time in 6 long years, it had a real chance to start over. 3 weeks after Karen's arrest, Green Hills was almost unrecognizable. No more ridiculous fines. No more dictatorial HOA meetings. And most importantly, no more power-hungry tyrant controlling everything with an iron fist wrapped in fake velvet. With Karen gone for good, the HOA was rebuilt from the ground up. A new board was elected, people who actually cared about the community instead of their own personal power. For the first time in years, the HOA was helping its residents instead of oppressing them. One afternoon, Ethan was outside washing his car, enjoying the kind of peace he hadn't had in months. Then, a voice called out from behind him, "Mr. Carter." Ethan turned around. It was Mr. Gregory, the oldest resident in the neighborhood, standing with a small group of neighbors. They all looked hesitant. A few of them scratched their heads, shuffled their feet, as if preparing to say the most difficult thing in the world. Finally, Mr. Gregory took a deep breath and spoke. We want to apologize." A wave of silence. "We let Karen control things for too long. We should have seen it sooner. We should have spoken up. But we didn't. And you're the one who had to deal with all her games." Ethan blinked, then let out a small smirk. "Well, I've had worse days." The group laughed, the tension easing slightly. A woman stepped forward, placing a box of cookies on the table beside him. "We made these to say thank you for not giving up, for giving our HOA a second chance." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "No poison, right?" Laughter rang out again, louder this time. Finally, Mr. Gregory patted Ethan on the shoulder. "You may not like HOAs, but thanks to you, this one is better." Ethan chuckled. "Still don't like HOAs. But I guess I can tolerate this one as long as there's no more Karens." A few days later, a moving truck pulled up in front of Karen's house. Boxes were stacked high on the sidewalk. Movers worked quickly, and within a few hours, Karen Thompson was no longer a resident of Green Hills. No one came to say goodbye. No one wished her well. The only acknowledgement was a few neighbors peeking through their windows, their expressions a mix of satisfaction and relief. Ethan stood near his car, arms crossed, watching the scene like a movie with a perfect ending. Karen stepped out of her house, pale, quiet, a shadow of the woman who once thought she was untouchable. She took one last look at the neighborhood, but no one looked back. There was no fear, no power left in her name. She climbed into the car, the door slammed shut, and her SUV rolled out of Green Hills forever. From somewhere in the distance, a resident whistled, waving dramatically. "Bye, Karen. Don't send us letters." The entire street burst into laughter. Ethan simply took a sip of coffee and went back to his day. For the first time in a long time, this neighborhood was truly at peace. That night, Ethan walked out to his car, ready to drive to his favorite bar and enjoy his first evening without HOA drama. But as he opened the door, he noticed a small envelope tucked under his windshield wiper. No return address. No HOA logo. Just one letter.
G.
Ethan picked it up, opened it, and read the single line inside. "She's moving to Green Oak City. Watch out for their HOA." Ethan paused for a moment. Then he let out a small laugh. Karen might have left Green Hills, but she was still Karen. She'd find a new HOA to control. She'd play the same power-hungry games. She'd try to rule over a new group of unsuspecting homeowners. But this time, Ethan didn't care. Not his problem anymore. He slipped the note into his pocket, got in his car, and drove off, leaving behind a neighborhood that was finally at peace.